Welcome to the JM Report. I am your host, Good Old JM, and this is episode 32, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. And as I speak, literally about 10 minutes ago, Crown Jewel just went on the air on the WWE Network, and I took a moment to see, what was going on, what the atmosphere was going to look like, and looks pretty good. I mean, they're still not announcing exactly where they are, just other than, the name of the stadium. Oh my goodness, I just had it here. The King Saudi University Stadium, presented by Saudi General Sports Authority. And it's only being held at Riyadh, not mentioning the country. Okay, I'm only going to assume that this was all predetermined, or not predetermined, but all given a heads up ahead of time that, yeah, we know where we are, the world knows where we are, but we're still not going to mention you. As far as country, we'll mention the city and the venue, and we'll go live on the network at 12 p.m. Eastern. And you're probably wondering, well, why do you report during a pay-per-view? Well, I'm glad you asked that, because this is usually the time I come to the studios and record my episodes. And there was obviously a bit of scheduling conflict, and I could have rescheduled, but you know what? I do have other things going on in my personal life that I have to attend to. Had a long couple of days earlier in the week. Those who know me in my personal life are aware of what that is exactly. And I just tend to have all my attention on that. I try not to leave anything unfinished or undone until it's, over with, and hopefully with a good outcome. But with that said, I guess I could just share what I saw in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the show. And I'll get into some of those details in a little bit here. But Hulk Hogan kicked off the pay-per-view. He was announced as the host, and it was speculated for maybe the past few days, definitely all week, because it was just rumored he was being promoted on a WWE.com website. Then he wasn't. He was quickly removed. I don't know what the planning or the thinking was behind that in particular, but the word got out, even if it's just a rumor, and it kept spreading and spreading. Not to mention the fact that Hulk Hogan himself said he will be in parts unknown, where exactly Crown Jewel will be taking place. So the cat was out of the bag, or the rat was out of the maze, or whatever the proper phrase is right now. But sometimes you just gotta ask what exactly is the way of thinking or the train of thought of WWE as a whole is. But whatever. You know what? I'm about to change out this chair here. It is bothering the hell out of me. Hold on a sec. That's better. So just can't stand sitting on squeaky chairs, especially when I'm doing a lot of constant moving here. But anyway, so Crown Jewel is underway as I speak. I was thinking of playing this in the background here at the studios, but might be a little too distracting for me. And so Hogan opened up the show, gave his usual speech. He didn't even mention where they were exactly. Just, I think, and I think those behind the scenes were aware of this. Like, listen, under any circumstances, don't say this, don't say that. So, as I guess, as a backup plan, or just in case you think you're gonna slip up, just mention the name of the pay-per-view. So, I'm glad to be here at Crown Jewel. You got to see this to believe it. I think Hogan, at least once, it looked like it didn't last long, like barely a couple of minutes. It looked like, oh shoot, what do I say? Yeah, Crown Jewel. Can't mention exactly where we are, but they are in there in Riyadh. Is how you pronounce the city of where they are now. And yeah, it's on the way. Of course, they got their World Cup tournament to determine in their minds who the best in the world is among 8 Americans. And it was a one-on-one match between Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman for the vacant Universal Championship. And I'll run down the card here in a little bit, but yeah, card subject to change. Yeah, no shit. There was some changes this week alone in the lineup, and again, they were rumored for days. It's funny how I guess things work out. So, as I mentioned, the Brock Lesnar Braun Strowman match for the Universal Championship that's been vacated by Roman Reigns a couple of weeks ago on Raw. Also, we have D-Generation X of Triple H and Shawn Michaels coming out of retirement after 8.5 long years to take on the Brothers of Destruction of The Undertaker and Kane. Looks like Kane and Undertaker are doing the heelish tactics here a little bit. At least it's my opinion, even though there's a good chance they might get a huge pop when they appear. The Bar of Sheamus and Cesaro, with Big Show in their corner, will defend their SmackDown Tag Team Championships against the New Day. Whether it be the combination of Big E, Kofi Kingston, and or Xavier Woods, we'll find out. And then they have their WWE Championship match of AJ Styles defending the title against now Samoa Joe. I'll get into the details of what happened with Daniel Bryan, but Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles had their Crown Jewel Championship match this past week on SmackDown instead, as many reports were indicating that Daniel Bryan was off the card and will not be going to Crown Jewel. And we all tuned in. And you know what? It was the very first segment. It was a promo by AJ Styles, then came out Daniel Bryan because he called him out. And got a little bit of heated exchange there. You know what? Let's not wait till Crown Jewel. Let's do this now. So the old, let's do this tonight instead of tomorrow or next week or next month when it's been advertised for so long. So Shane McMahon comes out and confirms, yes, let's not wait till Crown Jewel. Let's do this now. Had a great match, I got to say. Much better than their first match they ever had together. I believe it was Daniel Bryan's first or second match officially back when he came out of retirement and was active on the SmackDown roster. And he had a match with AJ Styles. Paige just came out, I think, the following week and announced that Bryan's first match on SmackDown will be against AJ Styles. I believe this was after WrestleMania, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, I thought this was a better match than the original match, I guess because there's a lot more at stake here. Bryan would tap out to the calf crusher from AJ Styles to retain the championship. There was a handshake. There was an embrace between the two. They know, hey, these guys have history, not all of them together, but they know they pay the price. They pay their dues throughout the years. It's still hard to believe that these guys, they're fit, they're in healthy condition. Seemingly, well, not seemingly, they're still very young, but you can't tell just by looking at them. I mean, you believe that AJ Styles is, I think, already 41 years old. Daniel Bryan's getting there himself. And it's like, wow, and you can still do this as if you just got off the training school, and it's almost second nature by now. And I got to really give them a lot of credit for this. They really put their hearts and soul into this one match, knowing that Bryan won't make it to Crown Jewel, and whether there'll be any repercussions, any penalties, any fines, or any backlash from the Saudi government themselves, because this is what they were expecting. And I'm sure there were some meetings or conversations like, listen, this is how they feel, and unfortunately we can't deliver, but we have a replacement. We have an alternative plan. That being Samoa Joe. After the match, Joe came back seemingly from a healed foot injury. No details of that yet, but this is why he was kept off TV for some weeks. Attacks both Styles and Bryan and choking them out in his coquina clutch and raised the championship belt over his head, seemingly or definitely showing off that the feud between himself and Styles is not over yet. And this was later confirmed as Paige was back in her office, and in comes AJ Styles and demanded a match between Samoa Joe, and Paige didn't want to praise or reward Samoa Joe for what he did, and Styles convinced her otherwise. Like, okay, then you got your match, Crown Jewel, you defend the title against Samoa Joe, and that will happen later on this afternoon, our time. and that would be the new alternative match. But there was another change in the World Cup tournament itself. The opening match, as right now, even though I shut it off, but we do have Rey Mysterio taking on Randy Orton. Later on, we'll see Jeff Hardy take on The Miz. Kurt Angle one-on-one with Dolph Ziggler. Seth Rollins, who was originally supposed to take on John Cena, has now been replaced by Bobby Lashley. This past Monday night on Raw, Lashley put the beat down on Finn Balor after there's a lot going on here, but acting general manager Baron Corbin was being helped to the back after receiving quite a few power slams from Braun Strowman. After Strowman and Lesnar got into a confrontation, and Strowman received an F5 for his efforts, and while Corbin is being helped to the back, out comes Finn Balor for his match against Bobby Lashley, and Balor, he just stood there smiling, kind of like acknowledging that, like, yeah, you deserve that, and put up the too sweet sign and kept walking, and this obviously pissed off Baron Corbin. So for reasons, I think I missed it, but for reasons, Lio Rush and Bobby Lashley walk into the trainer's office where Corbin was being attended to, and Corbin was praising Lashley for beating the hell out of Finn Balor, and he wanted to reward him for that. And you know what? You are now in the World Cup tournament to determine the best in the world at Crown Jewel, and Lashley's all smiles and paused for a second, like, wait a minute, aren't all the slots filled? Good question. So Baron Corbin, as an acting general manager, took it upon himself to make an announcement to remove John Cena because he never really qualified nor earned a spot, and gave that position to Bobby Lashley instead. And I found it funny leading up to Crown Jewel today. The promotional pictures of all 8 men that are going to compete in the tournament, you had John Cena in the forefront, right? And everyone else was behind him, basically like a V shape if you looked overhead, and you got 3 guys on one side, the other 4 on the other. But John Cena was smack in the middle. So now after this, after this change, I would think some would have thought, like, okay, so literally Lashley would take the position where Cena was in the promotional pictures. Like, nope, he was sent to the back, and now it's Kurt Angle in the forefront, and Lashley's all the way in the back, I think behind Jeff Hardy. So, good move. I don't know. It's I mean, it doesn't take much to Photoshop and do some editing like that. I should know. Yeah, I do it all the time. Hence the different unique thumbnails I come up with for these covers, if you will, for my episodes of the Jam Report. But again, Lashley replacing John Cena and Samoa Joe replacing Daniel Bryan. Very, in some ways, very suitable replacements. I know not many people are too fond of Lashley as far as character and in-ring ability. I think they're totally wrong with that, but that's just mine and their opinion. I think Lashley, if used right, can really shine as a heel now. I mean, he was heel for, I believe, his last run, or towards the end of his run with Impact Wrestling, and you know what? He pulled it off, even though he did most of the talking himself. He didn't really have much of a mouthpiece like he does now in Lio Rush, but I believe if given the proper materials, like just like an actor, when you watch a movie and you expect them to pull off a good performance, but with the material given, they can only do so much, and it's no different here. Excuse me. So let's get into some details of, at least as far as Daniel Bryan's concerned, as PW Insider has reported that Bryan was not going to make the trip to Saudi Arabia. Parts unknown. To compete for WWE's Crown Jewel against AJ Styles, as originally stated in Robbie Fox at Barstool Sports. Daniel Bryan, along with John Cena, were refusing, quote unquote, to make the trip after the news broke of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi getting brutally murdered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul back on October 2nd. Everything unfolded this week on Raw and SmackDown as acting general manager Baron Corbin was backstage attending to his wounds after a few power slams from Braun Strowman, and then he got an F5 by Brock Lesnar. all this I mentioned already, just obviously reading it verbatim here. And Corbin awarding Lashley's spot in the World Cup tournament, replacing John Cena. And over on SmackDown, the very first match for the title was AJ Styles defeating Daniel Bryan via tap out to retain. And this is where Samoa Joe attacks both men and chokes them out. And Paige agrees with Styles to give him a championship match at Crown Jewel. So Daniel Bryan reportedly made his decision by not going to parts unknown before the news broke of the brutal murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi took place. So this comes from Dave Meltzer, that Bryan felt uncomfortable in said countries for their treatment against homosexuals and the handling of Sami Zayn by not allowing him to compete on the card. This is back from Greatest Royal Rumble. And also reportedly wanted to see, he also wanted to lose to The Miz back at Super Showdown in Melbourne. So WWE, basically, according to this, I gather that WWE was in all favor of pushing Bryan, but as Crown Jewel got closer, I think Bryan was trying to place himself in a position like, well, this is coming up and it's a big deal, and the timing and the place could not have been any worse for him personally, and I guess he didn't want it. So moving forward, as far as Cena did not compete. Obviously, he's out there doing movies, TV appearances, and all and whatnot. Bryan, who's still active on the roster, was active this week, obviously on SmackDown. So there may or may not be any penalties. I mean, they've always said, being WWE, to have an open line of communication with their talent and superstars, and sounds to me that Bryan wouldn't budge, no matter what they offered or said or convince him otherwise. Like, I'm not doing this for sad reasons, and I'm sure there were more. Meltzer will go on to say that evidently Bryan, who knew little or nothing of the country until he got there, largely felt that he couldn't go back under those circumstances. It wasn't so much that the women weren't allowed to perform, even though he's married to a woman wrestler and has a sister-in-law who wrestles. If you can, anyway, Bryan. Meltzer will go on to say about Bryan that, but the key was what he learned about the treatment of homosexuals, and also that they wouldn't allow Sami Zayn to perform on the show, and he considered that racism. It was not the current controversy over Khashoggi that evidently made him make his decision, although one would think it would make him feel that strongly that his decision wasn't wrong. He had asked to lose to The Miz in Australia in a match where the winner would get a title shot. It's not clear that if that was because he knew that the title shot was going to take place at Crown Jewel, or because that he felt that it wasn't time yet to get back to his conclusive win, which would have come across as a blow-off of the program. Again, this all comes from Dave Meltzer. Sounds like speculation. You know, Meltzer can be hit or miss at times, even though other times when he's wrong, he doesn't admit to it. But I always give everyone the benefit of the doubt here. They're pretty strong statements to make. And I never had anything bad to say about Daniel Bryan. Anyone, including myself, can have their opinions about anything and everything. Good, bad, wrong, right, up, down, left, well, up, up to you, and before you end up punching in a contra code. But that is your given right as a human being. We do have something called free will, believe it or not. And this is this man's opinion, his point of view, his thoughts about it. And apparently had this building up inside of him ever since Greatest Royal Rumble, and touching on the Sami Zayn situation because of even though Sami Zayn's built from Canada, Sami Zayn does have a little bit on his background in that, even though right now Sami Zayn is nursing I believe two shoulder surgeries, post shoulder surgeries. He had double surgery earlier in the year, and yeah, he's gonna be recovering for quite some time. I believe he lives out in Orlando, Florida, if I'm not mistaken. But Sami Zayn, was not allowed to compete at all, much less even set foot on Saudi Arabia. Oh, sorry, parts unknown. Back during the Greatest Royal Rumble, and I'm just curious if that's even the right word to use here. What kind of conversations were held from the parts unknown side with the Vince and WWE side, because Sami Zayn's parents, or I think one of them is parents, I don't remember who, is from Syrian, making Sami Zayn Muslim, and was not allowed to compete because the differences between Saudis and Syrians, and it's really messed up. Really messed up. But more power and kudos to Daniel Bryan for standing up for his friend as one of the reasons why he did not want to return this time around, and possibly for the near future events to take place in parts unknown. I mean, we still got another 9 years left, multi-year events to take place, costing or worth a lot of money for WWE. So I'm pretty sure they're going to find ways moving forward, like, okay. And it's not like they didn't have enough time before to, wait to the last minute, literally, to write off Bryan from the show. So Bryan's been feeling and thinking this way since Greatest Royal Rumble. And that was, in April? Give or take. March, April. And that's, I don't know how many months, 7, 8 months, whatever it is. All that time to keep in mind. It's like, let's not give Bryan a position in anywhere, much less a championship match at the next pay-per-view when we go back, and avoid a possible friction or hesitation to show up. At the end of the day, Daniel Bryan and John Cena are not on the card. They're going to do with what they have. And, let's see how things turn out. And speaking of which, former WWE CEO and current administrator of small businesses in the White House, Linda McMahon, also former president of WWE, I might add, is apparently not backing up her husband's decision publicly. McMahon now serves in the White House under number 45, let's say, and was asked about the topic recently while at Reagan Airport by TMZ Sports, and simply said, if you want to talk WWE, you're talking to the wrong McMahon. She then went on to further distance herself from the decision, despite WWE being largely family ran, by simply saying, I don't run it, I am not responsible for it, you have to talk to Vince about it. So at the end of the day, between herself, Vince, and whatever any and all relationships between this country and that one, money talks, and the second half of that phrase goes, with the bullshit walks. Yeah, that's all that really matters, and that's the only reason why they did it. A lot of people have been very outspoken about it on social media. Here's my platform to do that. Now it just comes if it's a right or wrong decision. And I've always been a believer, and I've always said, hey, if there's an opportunity to make money, or in this case, this kind of money where it's in the millions, who's to say? But honestly, and I know some will probably think like, you wouldn't do something like that. Well, first of all, you don't know me, and second of all, I will be in great hesitation. A lot of companies, including UFC, I mentioned last time, they decided to pull out of whatever deals they had going on the table with parts unknown, and doesn't mean that they can't get the similar or better deal somewhere else. In that case, that's that kind of logic I would follow. It's like, well, for the sake of argument, or hypothetically speaking, well, for each appearance I make in your country, I get paid $1 million. But over here, they're offering me 1.5, closer to 2 million. And even though I can make as many as appearances as I want to, but the rest of the time there, I won't have to spend as much. If I'm not needed, I don't need to be there as long as I don't have to be. So if I'm scheduled to appear, say at a conference for 2 hours, then well, I'll get my 2 hours. That's what it was agreed upon, and I can catch the next flight out of there, and still get paid. It's not exactly the perfect analogy, but what I'm trying to say is, I probably would not have taken that deal. If you want to take me to court for it, yeah, but you need to understand what this looks like on a larger scale. And when you're pressured by so many different angles and so many different offices and people, and a lot of those people are in pretty much in the governmental position in your country, and they reached out to you, basically, don't do this, postpone it, reschedule, or whatever. There were other options. Hell, they canceled ticket sales. They changed venues from a larger soccer stadium to now a more smaller university stadium. So I don't want to hear that it wasn't possible. They were heading in that direction, but again, we don't know what happened behind closed doors just to keep this thing alive, matter of speaking. So in the next couple hours, maybe more than that, Crown Jewel will be in the history books, and who knows by the time the next one comes around, which is yet to be announced, the next event after Crown Jewel in that part of the world, that things won't boil over, or more of this investigation is handled with and concluded. I doubt it, but point being that we've all can move on somehow. But, this is still going to be one of, if not the most controversial events of all time as far as WWE concerned. I'm sure many of you know of a former WWE employee that once said, I even had a book named after it, Controversy Creates Cash. The cash was already there. The controversy was, if anything, in their minds, WWE, it was just the stamp of approval. Meaning that we can probably get more money, and it wouldn't surprise me if more money was offered. Like, listen, it costs you. We offered X amount of money to have this show. We're going to offer you, on top of that, even more X amount of money to keep it. That's just speculation. Call it a rumor. Call it an innuendo, which is really not the phrase for it, but I can speculate as much as the next person can and come up with these possibilities. I mean, hell, you brought in Hulk Hogan. Hogan was just recently reinstated early in the summer, in between the Greatest Royal Rumble and Crown Jewel here. And I think I also mentioned this last time. Hey, well, it looks like the kingdom, the king and the prince are really old school fans. It's like, well, he's currently suspended. Well, this suitcase says, this suitcase full of money says he's not. Well, he's reinstated. Get Terry on the phone for me. I try not to have too much fun at the expense of many who are against this. I know there are others who, and on the protests, will not watch the show. One being, oh my goodness, I forgot his name now. Oh, I feel so bad that I forget his name. Yes, Brian Zane. Almost confused him with Sammy, but I was like, wait a minute, no, that doesn't make any sense. But no, Brian Zane over at Wrestling with Regret had a recent video posted. I believe it was during his Who Wore It Better. And in the beginning, he just flat out said that he refuses to watch the show. And you know what? Praise, kudos, and shout outs to Bryan for making that decision. And I don't know what his fan base feels about that, but, you know, he made a decision. He's sticking to it. I'm sure he'll read about it. And honestly, I was a little bit of hesitation. Not hesitation, but also debating myself with whether or not to watch the show. Well, obviously, I tuned in to see what the opening was going to be like. So by the time I get back, done here, putting everything together and then uploading and all that, it'll more than likely be over. But for now, I want to believe that at least Bryan would read about the reviews, the results at least, because he still got to put out his reviews as well and share that with the world. But for now, as far as I know, and his fan base goes, he's not going to watch. And I guess just his decision. He's going to stick to it. Also, watching the little bit of the opening that I did, we saw the commentating team of Michael Cole, Corey Graves, and Renee Young. It was recently revealed that Renee Young will be traveling to Crown Jewel to do her announcer's duties. This is notable since women can't compete on the show, but more details have come out that show that she isn't being treated like her male co-workers, I should say. And the news comes from the latest issue of the Wrestling Observer and says that Renee Young has been given special travel arrangements and accommodations while she's in Crown Jewel or attending before and after Crown Jewel. She's not traveling with the rest of the WWE roster and is being treated quite unique, or for safety reasons. They put extra precaution. They being WWE. I don't think anyone from the Crown Jewel side of things are chipping in much, but this is all coming from Meltzer. But though at the time was not confirmed, that it'll be interesting to see where Young sits during the event, and notes that Meltzer would note that that they could move the announcer's desk to a different part of the venue, maybe a la Nitro, where it was near the entrance ramp, for example. So they are not publicly seen in front of the audience. This Renee Young Crown Jewel update is yet another reminder, and the same reasons why Daniel Bryan isn't going to the event, or at least one of them is, one of the reasons, that the country has gone a long way to go with how many minorities and women are treated, and unfortunately, that's still a thing going on. And then the question, one of the biggest questions would be, then why support that? Fortunately, I just got done a while ago saying you're all entitled to your beliefs and opinions, and this kind of falls into that. Only difference is it's an entire country. That's just how they feel. I personally don't plan to visit that part of the world anytime soon. Not basically on the reasons given by, say, Daniel Bryan or others who have shown concern before, more because of historic reasons. But at the same time, it's, if they don't want you there, they don't want you there. Much less step forward on their country and then do something you're not supposed to with rules, laws, and other establishment that's been in place for many years. Hence why women can't perform. Yeah, women can drive now, but there was a long time when they could not. Can't show any part of their bodies other than their eyes. And seeing how most of WWE women wrestlers are with their attires and can be pretty revealing at times. And yes, there are those occasional wardrobe malfunctions. They don't want that. But to clear that air right now, and from the opening bit I just saw while Rey Mysterio was heading toward the ring, Renee Young was at ringside with Cole and Graves as part of the broadcast team. Renee was covered from, I guess, neck down, all in black, best I could tell. I didn't see her from the waist down because the table was in the way. I'm not sure what they call that, but the sleeves with the holes in it, where you can basically wrap your thumb around it. It goes between your thumb and your first index finger. She was wearing that. Again, all in black. Her usual hairstyle, nothing different there. I guess she wasn't asked to cover up her face. How a lot of women usually or expected to do. But then again, she's not walking around in the streets. She's at an event and needs to speak into a microphone and not sound so muffled here. So I guess kudos in a sense, given that Renee Young was allowed to do so. Basically, the Raw team is announcing the entire event at Crown Jewel, and we'll just see how it goes. I mentioned of Hulk Hogan. He opened up the show. He's the host. I would assume he'll be seen throughout backstage segments, or in that general manager role, if you will, whenever something needs to be mentioned or changed around. Instead of Paige or Corbin, you got Hogan instead because he's in charge, so to speak. And Hogan was streaming live on social media. I think it was his Facebook account that he was already on a plane flying out with Jimmy Hart. I didn't watch the entire bit, but the parts that I did watch, he didn't mention where he was going, but it was pretty obvious. I mean, flying out of, I believe, Orlando and having nothing but ocean underneath you, you go to the other side of the world, and you already confirmed it with the Orlando Sentinel of what was going on. So no longer the best kept secret of the week as far as Hulk Hogan and WWE is concerned, but it's ongoing. We are about an hour in, at least with my episode, and about an hour in with Crown Jewel. I will watch probably later on tonight, so it's not going to be easy to avoid any spoilers, if any, take place on social medias, but gotta do what I gotta do. And there was another pay-per-view this past weekend. Evolution, WWE's first ever all-women's pay-per-view. And my thoughts, well, overall, and I said this before elsewhere, but because, and I know a lot of people would agree, but because of the lack of promotion, the lack of attention, Crown Jewel, Crown Jewel was given all the attention, and Evolution was an afterthought. And some can speculate, some can defend as far as the unique look that Evolution was given. And okay, if anything, you would have to give them a bit of a different look as far as the staging goes, the rampway and the Titantron, what have you. I didn't expect it to be this different, where it basically looked like a house show. During the kickoff, they had a few surprise guests, including Eve Torres. She looked amazing, by the way. And Beth Phoenix was part of the commentating team, Renee Young as well, and among a few other names that were going to be part of the card here that I'll get into in a minute. You see maybe the second half of the kickoff show, the last half an hour of it. You see people wandering into the arena at the Nassau Coliseum. And towards the end of the kickoff show, they had a wide shot of the audience, and there were so many pockets of empty seats. And they didn't use the entire arena, meaning where literally one section, if it's an oval-shaped arena, which I don't think it is, not completely, but I'm trying to remember an oval shot view of it. If you look at an oval shape on the either right or left side, but they'll pick one side of that, and that will be the area in a section where the staging and the rampway will be constructed. So obviously the seats behind that area will be topped off, and the seats won't be sold. Right? And then you have the rest of the arena to, depending on the view, especially up in the upper deck section. That's when they start selling off seats, and then you can sit and enjoy the show. I don't want to say they used half the arena, but I'll say maybe 3/4 of it, if not a little bit less than that, because it was not a complete sellout. It was not. I know ticket sales at first weren't going as fast as they thought they would, and then there was a bit of a slowdown. And then when actual matches were being announced, and like, okay, well, let's see what this is about. And they tried their best, and I don't know, because of the examples mentioned, that they decided to darken the arena and making it look like a glorified house show, an expensive one at that. And the show barely made it to 2.5 hours long. I thought that was a mistake. They could have gone at least just over 3 hours. But my thing is, I couldn't help but to look back or think back when it was first announced. It was Triple H and Stephanie and in the ring. And you had basically the majority of the WWE roster on Raw on stage there. Raw, SmackDown, 205 Live, NXT. And then I think it was Triple H who called out or asked the women to step forward. And that's when he made the announcement that coming up in October, you will have your own pay-per-view. And among them was Nikki Cross. I did not see her on this pay-per-view anywhere. Not even during the kickoff show. But then again, I didn't watch the whole thing because they weren't saying much that as far as what we didn't know already. And originally, it was part of the card where it was going to be the UK NXT Women's Championship match. But then there were talks about that it was removed for unknown reasons. Others thought that the ongoing UK shows on the network weren't up to date as far as leading into Evolution at the time, and it would have been thrown off a bit storyline-wise. And I thought, well, that was a bit of a cop-out reason, because even before you start getting as far as you did with the UK storylines on network from NXT, it was already announced the first time that this match would take place. But instead, it was relegated to a dark match as Rhea Ripley defeated Dakota Kai to retain her the UK NXT Women's Championship in a rematch of the finals of the original tournament earlier this summer. And then we got into the main card as the opening match was Trish Stratus and Lita defeating Mickie James and Alicia Fox, replacing Alexa Bliss, who unfortunately was suffering from concussion from the previous weekend at a live event or house show. And originally, talk about things changing and cards subject to change, this was originally 2 separate one-on-one matches between Trish and Alexa Bliss and Lita versus Mickie James. It's good to have plan B, C, and D because Alexa didn't even end up competing at all. She did get physical. She did get involved trying to interfere, but it wasn't enough to put one over the Hall of Famers here, as Trish and Lita were victorious. Nia Jax was victorious in the Battle Royal, where 19 of the women competed, including Hall of Famers and legends and current superstars, where the winner would face the women's champion of their brand at a later date. And we found out that it was Nia Jax, and she mentioned on her post-match promo, I should say, that, yeah, she's going after the Raw Women's title, and whether it's Ronda Rousey or Nikki Bella, to watch out. And no exact time, well, when and where said championship match will take place. Excuse me. Then we get into the Mae Young Classic Finals for 2018. Toni Storm, perhaps with the comeback story of the year, would defeat Io Shirai in a tremendous match. I got to say, one of the best matches of the night I saw, and well-deserved, as Toni Storm came up short last year. I believe she was eliminated in the semifinals, and this is her comeback story. In a 6-women tag team match, Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Natalya would defeat all members of the Riot Squad. There was a spot here that was I guess, somewhat of a botch. I don't know. I watched it several times. I couldn't make heads or tails out of it, but you had the Riot Squad on the outside of the ring, and Sasha was about to do a head over heel, over the top rope suicide dive kind of thing, or somersault. But I don't know exactly what happened. But instead of landing on the Riot Squad, where the plan was obviously for them to catch Sasha, but instead Sasha rotates over the top rope and lands sitting down on the apron, and basically the Riot Squad had to scoop her up off of there, spin around, and launch Sasha Banks into the barricades, and that looked brutal. So basically butt bumping onto the apron, and then swing around and you get your back into the ring area, the guardrail. And that was something else. They didn't use the LED boards for the apron, the LED ring post, the padded guardrails. It was literally a house show. And some say, I think even Meltzer pointed this out, that like, well, everything was shipped off to Raw and SmackDown, and what would have been used as the pay-per-view of the week, or the pay-per-view that Sunday night, where everything was already shipped off to Crown Jewel. Okay, I could see that. I mean, but again, I guess trying to be different, but less is more in this case. But Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Natalya were victorious in a 6-woman tag. Then we see the NXT Women's Championship as Shayna Baszler regained the title, becoming the first ever 2-time women's champion on that brand, as Kairi Sane was choked out and the referee called for the bell as a technical submission, as she was unable to respond to the referee's commands or the old raising the arm up and down routine, as she was just out of it, as Shayna had a little bit of help from her MMA4 horsewomen who were ringside. They got heavily involved, and be interesting to see how they move forward in this. You got, again, Shayna Baszler as now the new NXT Women's Champion. You got Ronda Rousey as the Raw Women's Champion. And, timing, I guess, especially if the belief is the rumor that will be coming soon, and I'll get to in a little bit as well, the possibility of women's tag team championships. And you have the MMA4 horsewomen holding all the belts, a la Evolution, which was the name of this pay-per-view as well, ironically. See how things come together. Small world. Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, I believe, had the match of the night. I mean, there were other matches that were pretty entertaining, such as the Toni Storm, Io Shirai match. I didn't see the Rhea Ripley, Dakota Kai match, as it wasn't on a network as far as I know. I just read about this as fans were putting out their points of view on social media. And this one was definitely the match of the night. Should have been main event, but no one asked me. I didn't book it. But in the last women's standing match, it took Becky Lynch to powerbomb Charlotte Flair off the top rope down to the arena floor through a table. And Charlotte Flair sold it as if she was literally broken in half. Could not answer the referee's 10 count, and Becky Lynch will retain her SmackDown Women's Championship. And we move on to the main event. Ronda Rousey defending her Raw Women's title against Nikki Bella, who was accompanied by Brie Bella, waving somewhat a huge flag that says Bella-lution. Someone's been hooked on phonics as a little kid. And Ronda Rousey would defeat Brie Bella via submission armbar to retain her women's championship, and possibly looking to face Nia Jackson in the near future. But they did something here the following. Well, let me finish up here. After the match, Ronda would leave the ring and head up the rampway, and all the women that competed and some who were there in attendance came out on the staging area, and all the women basically took their bow. The Bellas would eventually join in. Stephanie would come out, and then eventually see Triple H applauding, and Yeah, because of the lack of promotions and attention this was given, I was hoping, you know what? The only vindication here is that all the women that are going to be part of the show is to go out there and kick ass. And you know what? They did absolutely just that. I enjoyed the show from beginning to end. There were, a couple of botches here and there, but, it happens even with the best of them. Doesn't always have to be a flawless, 100% smooth running show. But all things considered, and the meaning behind this and giving enough support, attention, or lack thereof, and be, I guess, what's the word here? To not to depend on them. I know they had faith in them, but hoping that an all-women show ran by WWE is something that they can do on an annual basis. But unfortunately, they're the victim of circumstances here because Crown Jewel was such a short time between one event to another. It was literally 6 days away, and all the focus was on the show that was happening later, not yours. And you know what? That showed that suffered, but at the end of the day, I'm just glad to see that all the women really put on a hell of a show here. They gave it their all, proving that they belong on the main stage just as much as the men do. And they're proven athletes. They're proven to go out there and give it their all. And I just can't compliment them enough. I mean, they deserved better than what they had. Again, as far as the promotions and advertising and all that goes. And they went out there, and they deserve a pat on the back, a handshake, a high five, or if you're in Bayley's case, a nice hug. And I would really like to see maybe also a different placement as far as schedule goes for Evolution 2 if one were to happen. Maybe not so close to your damn Parts Unknown show, and not so far apart than a couple of weeks ago we just had Super Showdown. And it's great that they're getting out there. This is something I personally wanted to see for a long time and have it televised. Now we're just missing to have them head over to South America, head over to Africa, to Asia. And it's okay, they've done shows like that before, but how many of them were even televised on a pay-per-view, much less recorded for Coliseum video? And then 6 months to a year later, we'll get to see what the fuss was about at the time when, by the time you saw it, it was irrelevant. So, yes, I understand there's, a lot of stuff going on in South America, so that may or may not happen. Asia, very similar story, especially in North and South Korea. There's still Africa. There's still Europe. Hell, they've done Europe. They got the UK NXT for crying out loud. And they've had specials, but not pay-per-views. And, there is a difference. And I'm about to throw this bottle cap around across the hall here. So congratulations, ladies. If any of you are listening, you definitely deserved every bit of the accolade at the end there. You all came together and took your bow and said thank you to the fans and all, but we thank you. Look forward to the next Evolution pay-per-view. And again, someone really needs to reorganize the scheduling there. I know everything's done ahead of time, but they can, always go with the usual card subject to change. Or in this case, the entire card needs to be reorganized and rescheduled. But we'll see what happens. So a few notes from Evolution, and this happened during the week, and even at Evolution, as a lot of fans took to Twitter in particular and mentioned that security at these events, Raw, SmackDown, and Evolution, the go-home shows for Evolution, security was handing out signs for the fans. And a few of them read, "We want women tag team championships." And they were specifically given to fans where they were told or they knew that they were going to be within camera shots, whether it was watching a wrestler come down the aisle and you see in the background either left or right, and there's a sign that was handed out that's saying, "We want women's tag team championships." So Oh, WWE can be so slick. So only when it's convenient would they say, we listen to the audience and capitalize and take all the credit, basically saying that. But little background here. And as of right now, this is the only bit of information and intel. But according to Becky Lynch, who was at Ace Comic-Con earlier in the year, during a sit-down Q&A session, I should say, a fan asked about having women's tag team championships in WWE like they did it back in the old days, 70s and 80s. And Becky said that 2 years ago, from the time of the Ace Comic-Con, that she brought it up to the higher-ups 2 years ago about possibility having women's tag team matches. And so far, at the time anyway, that they were still thinking about it. And that may or may not happen. And then after that, there was some hashtags on social media after Becky Lynch's announcement or part of the speech there. And there were some signs, not as many as there were this week, but there were signs of women's tag team championships, bring back women's tag team titles, things of that nature. So either they weren't picked up as much as they wanted to, or maybe somebody recently noticed, hey, they didn't want to see that sign about women's tag team matches. Maybe they took as a reminder because, 2 years ago was such a long time ago in WWE. That could be, decades, centuries, and reminded themselves, oh, yeah, didn't Becky, I thought these words were used, but didn't Becky say something? Like, no, it was our idea. Becky didn't say a damn thing, even though it's out there on social media somewhere. And yeah, so do not be surprised if, more than likely be Stephanie, they'll come out to Raw, SmackDown, or whatever, most likely Raw, and say, we heard you, we saw your signs. It's like, yeah, the very same signs you handed out, and now here's your wish, or here's what you always been wanting: women's tag team championship matches. We're going to set up tournaments and blah blah blah. So I guess everything had to happen first before we get here, meaning they set the seeds, they plant the seeds. They being WWE, pronouns, pal, and take all the credit for it. That's pretty sad, but you know what? Looks like we're going to get them. There's word out there that the physical championship belts have been created. People saying, well, there are photos out there, but each time I look them up, they're all different photos of the customizations, but not of the actual photo of the actual belts themselves that the women are going to be wearing. So I'll wait till the actual reveal, whether that's Survivor Series or if it's too soon, maybe at Royal Rumble or WrestleMania. I just don't see them debuting them at some random pay-per-view between now and then. Now and then, then being whenever they decide to reveal them. But more than likely, we'll probably get a social media post, and here they are, and then that's when and where they'll mention exactly of the tournament that has to take place. I would imagine that there would have to be a tournament. You just can't randomly pick 4 women, split them up into tag teams, and they'll compete. I mean, that'll just make no sense here. Everyone will deserve a chance or an opportunity for the titles. So we shall see. I mentioned last week that Alexa Bliss will be at Evolution based on what Mickie James said in an interview while everyone was in the New York area. But I have to admit, Mickie James wasn't specific, unfortunately, as Alexa Bliss was unable to compete due to an injury, in this case a concussion. However, Trish Stratus spoke to Newsweek and said that she would still very much love to have a one-on-one match with Alexa Bliss in the near future, as Trish Stratus and Lita would return the very next night on Raw and be part of a huge 10-women tag team match, teaming up with Bayley, Sasha, and Natalya, taking on Mickie James, Alicia Fox, and the Riot Squad on Raw. And Trish later on would say during the Newsweek article, I can't speak English today, that me and Lita have been on the same side, opposite side for almost 20 years. We got it. We know each other. We bring it out our best of each other and feel it will be extremely stratifying. Couldn't help yourself. And Trish goes on to say, I remember when she came onto the scene and my timeline was Shades of Trish. And I was like, who is this girl? So Trish will go on to still compliment Alexa Bliss for all her work despite her current injury right now. And still looking forward to a match one-on-one. As the doors are open, it seems like, for Lita and Trish to make occasional appearances. Maybe we will still get that one-on-one match. Logically, anyone would say, well, there's always WrestleMania. Well, true. The only downside is, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but we don't know what current storyline or plans they are in place for Alexa Bliss when she's ready to be cleared medically back in the ring. And unfortunately, when it comes to injuries, unfortunately, changes do happen. A lot of changes. Alicia Fox, which wasn't doing much other than with Jinder Mahal and the Singh brothers. Like from one week to another, she goes from Jinder Mahal and the Singh brothers, and now she gets mixed up with the tag team match at Evolution with Lita and Trish. So changes can happen on the fly. Changes can happen the day of. So it sucks not to have plans to stick with them, even though they're months out and someone gets hurt. So I would like to assume that after whatever feud Nia Jax is going to have with Ronda post Survivor Series, and there'll be a title match here, and eventually get Alexa Bliss back on a title run, or at least in a title picture going after the championship. But you got now Sasha Banks, who's back in the fold. You got Bayley. Hopefully something good will come out of that relationship as far as storylines go. Natalya, who's yet to get another title shot. So it's a lot of what ifs going on here. But as always, when someone gets hurt, it sets things back a little bit, or just changes things moving forward. And as I mentioned, Lita and Trish were back on Raw this week, 6 years after the fact, since they competed. And there's a good reason for this, as it turns out that their Evolution participation wasn't a one-off, but the start of a longer plan, as the pair of Hall of Famers, according to Mike Johnson. The current plan is to team up and stick around until WrestleMania. And Johnson would say, we've heard the beginning of next year there are plans for them. There was talks of Lita and Trish in the big tag team match for the big WrestleMania event. So with everything I just mentioned, with the changes coming up or changes that are already in play, and the anytime now announcement of the women's tag team championship matches or championship tournament to determine new tag team women's champions, and the plan mentioned here by Mike Johnson of a tag team match with Lita and Trish at Mania. Who's to say? Hopefully that wasn't a spoiler, but who's to say that won't be the finals? Or just another attempt to have legends on the card, and who knows? I don't know. Finally have the actual Evolution tag team match we didn't get to have this past week, but wait till Mania and watch it then. So much happening and so little time to explain everything else. And well, I may not sound like it, but you know what? I'm pretty excited and looking forward to this. Of course, I got Crown Jewel going on as I speak. We just got done with another pay-per-view in Evolution. Will there be any fallout or penalties for John Cena and Daniel Bryan not participating? I really doubt they'll do anything with John Cena, but Bryan, who knows? Maybe not. Not to mention, he didn't expect this. But then again, maybe it was one of his frame of minds that when he resigned back in September, that Crown Jewel was coming, and maybe he didn't know that was the direction that they were going, or just as time went on, like, hey, eventually you're going to get your title shot and maybe a run with it, as I think AJ Styles is ranked number 5 in the top 10 longest reigning WWE champions of all time. So I don't know if they're looking to break records again with AJ Styles and have Bryan do so and have a run with it. But with the changes now, I mean, I would love to see Samoa Joe at least once, but the concern there, and many of it pointed out that, you know, Joe, at least every year, gets seriously hurt at least once a year. So there may not be that confidence in him that he avoids injury and he's a champion of any sort, where they don't have to remove him because he needs to take time off to recover, or much worse, surgery done. But we shall see. I always say that. I should end up getting a T-shirt that says just that. We'll let's see what happens. We'll just see. Tenille Dashwood, formerly known as Emma in the WWE, I gotta say, she showed recently on her Instagram account tremendous bravery, I gotta say. And special shout out to Tenille, and for sharing her current struggle right now with psoriasis. And she shared this week photographs that were taken of her. And according to the description, it was taken about 6 weeks ago. And yeah, she's sharing the effects of the skin condition and remains optimistic and grateful for what she has done in her career, and is hoping to spread awareness of psoriasis, and briefly share what she posted as far as a statement goes. If only you can hear all the stories of my skin would tell. I've contemplated whether or not I should share these pictures. Vulnerability is terrifying. Growing up, I never pictured myself suffering from an autoimmune disease and being covered from head to toe with a skin condition. I never pictured myself having surgery on my spine because of a herniated disc was touching on my spinal cord. I also didn't imagine that I'd be recovering from a second shoulder surgery now, let alone be a first. But here I am, realizing this is life. In fact, it's these things that made me who I am. I've had my lows, but with each low, I've scrambled for answers and solutions. I've fought, I've researched, and I've done everything I can to get better. I've dreamed big and learned not to take life for granted. The physical damage is rough, yes, but the mental and emotional damage far outweighs that. And she'll describe, as she goes on, that the pictures, again, were taken about 6 weeks ago from the time that she shared it. And she will conclude, there is hope, and I am thankful for what I've learned from at My Goodness Recipes and at Medical Medium. And I am thankful for my mom, my family, and my friends for being there for me as I heal. So she still has quite a road left to recovery. I'm not aware of any cancellations as far as meet and greets, because she, as far as I know, I even looked it up, still scheduled to appear at the big event in New York City next weekend, which I will be there for. And wouldn't surprise me, and it will be understandable if her people, if you will, cancel that appearance, and still just needs to be at home recovering instead of going out there, unless it's for doctor's visits or other kinds of appointments. But I would like to extend my get well wishes to Tenille Dashwood to get better real soon. And once again, pointing out her bravery to decide to share photos of her current condition and what she goes through right now on a regular basis, if not a daily basis. And it's a tough time for her right now. And again, hopefully she gets real soon. It was announced on WWE.com that Stone Cold Steve Austin will now be narrating for NASCAR's Texas playoff race, which the rumors persisting regarding a potential return to the WWE. Stone Cold Steve Austin mentioned before that he kind of pisses off Vince McMahon whenever Austin teases a possible return. Not the kind of returns we've seen him do lately. Then again, there haven't been much of them, but a return as in-ring return. And for many years, right now, so far after Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold is the only one sticking to his word as far as being retired and not stepping back into the ring. So there's at least that. But Austin also shared that, as I mentioned, his narration duties for NASCAR coming up, I believe, is this weekend on NBC. Yes, matter of fact, it's going to be on NBC this Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And Stone Cold Steve Austin will also be carrying the checkered flag at the end of the race. And we'll see how that does. I mean, Stone Cold is open. Is very open to trying different things. I believe he's still doing his. Oh my goodness, he has like 2 or 3 different shows, and I'm trying to remember all the names of them. But the Broken Skull Ranch, I tune in from time to time, and I lost track of what season he's up to with that. And of course, he's still busy hunting and. I think he's growing a family of dogs back home on his ranch. So, the man's staying busy. He makes occasional TV appearances, and this Saturday afternoon will be no different. And as far as the WWE return goes, well, we're all coming up on WrestleMania season. It's usually between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, but usually seeds are planted by Survivor Series time. So we'll see what happens with that. And it's always great seeing Stone Cold back in the ring, running his mouth and chugging down some beer. And I believe last time we saw him on television was for Raw 25 earlier in 2018 in the Barclays Center. So, yeah, I mean, if there's time and a spot for him, then, I say give it to him. Otherwise, it'll be a nice Stone Cold stun at the end of that conversation. Jeff Jarrett fought Dr. Ray Wagner Jr. at AAA's Héroes Inmortales, or Immortal Heroes, last weekend and lost a hair versus hair match. So, Jeff Jarrett is now bald. Jeff Jarrett had to shave his signature hairstyle clean off as Jarrett won the AAA Mega Championship after defeating Dr. Ray Wagner and Rey Mysterio back in June, but then will lose it in August to Phoenix. This run has been Jarrett's second with the promotion, so here's someone else staying pretty busy, now with Impact, now with Global Force, even though they've merged somehow. Even as a Hall of Famer with the WWE, he's still pretty active, and he has spent quite some time in Mexico, AAA in particular, and the man's a good sport. And it's funny, this is not the first hair versus hair match on record that he lost. I'm sure there were others in between, but you go back to 1998 at SummerSlam, losing to X-Pac in a hair versus hair match. And pretty much since then, was that 20 years ago? That he's had that signature short hairstyle, that spiky look for all this time. And now he's just decided to go completely bald. So kudos to Jeff Jarrett there. And there's a hilarious pic. There's a hilarious after picture backstage. It looked like, and I'm sure he's in character, but he just looks pissed off. Like, what are you looking at? Kind of bit. There's I guess, a spin or a bit of a change coming up, according to the WrestleMania travel package that's been announced, and some details were described in the packages for upcoming WrestleMania weekend, and in particular for NXT TakeOver. Now, this past year's SummerSlam in Brooklyn was the last Brooklyn SummerSlam show, as I believe they're heading back to, no, scratch that. Los Angeles was going to be the original idea to head back to, as you know, you spend a few years on the East Coast and then another few years on the West Coast, so they would have jumped back and forth. But now it looks like Toronto may end up getting SummerSlam for 2019. So NXT TakeOver is expected to still take place in New York during WrestleMania. So let's spread the cards out here a little before I confuse anyone. Next year's SummerSlam for 2019 is expected to take place in Toronto. So that weekend, NXT obviously will be NXT TakeOver Toronto, or wherever exactly venue they'll be in. But WrestleMania 35 is at the MetLife Stadium, and NXT TakeOver will be back in Barclays Center. But it won't be called NXT Brooklyn. It'll be called NXT TakeOver New York. So a bit of a rebranding, if you will. I can understand how that could be confusing at times. Like, wait, for 4 years you've been calling it NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Now it's just NXT TakeOver New York. Well, it was called Brooklyn, or TakeOver Brooklyn, because for SummerSlam. Now we're discussing WrestleMania weekend in Barclays Center as well. And you're just going to be called New York. I guess that's more to avoid said confusion or discussion that whenever NXT was in the Barclays Center, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn meant or represented SummerSlam weekend. And in this case, upcoming NXT TakeOver New York will be representing the weekend of WrestleMania, when they will be at MetLife Stadium. So I can see the bit of confusion there, if not more so, but that's what they're going with. And it's I mean personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I understand the renaming of the same show taking place in the same arena in this case, but it's not that big of a deal, to be honest. Again, I can understand how it can be confusing, but it's just a matter of the timing of the year and what it's linked to. You know, NXT TakeOver Brooklyn was linked to SummerSlam, and now NXT TakeOver New York from Barclays Center will be linked to WrestleMania next year. So, but I haven't seen any complaints. I haven't seen any arguing on social media at all. So the fans seem to understand. I'm pretty sure there's going to be at least that one individual or small group of individuals. You know, how can you rename it and blah blah blah. I mean, Brooklyn is in New York, so unless you just want to just pick it up and head somewhere else, then that's fine too, I guess. But at least you guys are getting a show. I only hope that I could attend, but you know, it is what it is. But also curious to see how many years has it been? I'm sure it's over a decade since SummerSlam has seen Toronto, or vice versa. And between now and then, expecting a lot of changes. I would imagine there would be at least one more event taking place at Parts Unknown. Hopefully the dust has settled post Crown Jewel. It wouldn't surprise me if they end up renaming Crown Jewel to something else, assuming that time of year they'll return and going to have a similar event such as another tournament. I doubt it. I mean, what sense would that make? So you'll determine the best of the world every year, and assuming that the winner of said tournament will be around in the same company the following year. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But that would do it. Didn't have much to say this week because all eyes and all focus was on Crown Jewel today. I shared my thoughts about Evolution and hoping to see another one in the near future. There aren't too many first evers for WWE's women's roster point of view goes, and all eyes on Crown Jewel. But I guess it's almost irony, I guess, where and the same thing happened during Greatest Royal Rumble, where there weren't any events scheduled out here in the States, and the roster that didn't go or didn't travel will still have other commitments such as Comic-Cons or other types of appearances. And I think starting Wednesday of this week, almost all of the women on the roster took to social media and just pretty much shared their time off, whether they're at the beach or hanging out with other friends, walking their dogs, shopping, picking out Halloween costumes this year. It was real fun. I mean, it's just taking full advantage of the time that, one, the boss is not in town. Most of your friends who are male are around the world doing their thing. I'm pretty sure some of them are at home now as I speak watching the show, if not all of them. But, the point is that they're taking advantage of the fun and extra time that they have before they get back to work, say Monday. If WWE travels out, you know what? I just reminded myself of Raw this week is taking place in England. So the women's roster may have to rendezvous with them for Raw and SmackDown in London this coming week, and possibly maybe fly out as late as Saturday. So maybe enjoy the rest of today and half of tomorrow or whatever it is, and fly out and meet up on Sunday to catch up on things, any production meetings of sorts, and perform on Monday for Raw and SmackDown on Tuesday. So so at least there's some good out of this, where the women can't travel with all the guys to certain parts of the world, unfortunately. So I want to get that extra time off. And if it's believed what happened during Greatest Royal Rumble, according to Jim Ross, I think it was, that mentioned that he believed that, the women still got paid as if they were performing at the show, even though they didn't. And it's only fair. It's not their fault that they're not allowed to compete, much less even make an appearance. And, it's just how things are set up in that part of the world. So fair is fair. And you got to take care of your people. So anywho, I hope everyone enjoyed their Halloween this week. I know I did. Had a lot of fun with my nieces and going trick-or-treating for a while. Got some candy myself. Nothing major, but, still make fun. Make the best of it. And I'll go home in a little while before I upload this and try to watch the remainder of Crown Jewel. Who won, who didn't, who was there, any spoilers, who made an appearance, whatnot. And, of course, I'll have all of the results, all the reviews for you next time on the JM Report. And I also encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to check out my interview that I had with Georgia Smith, daughter of WWE legend and hopeful Hall of Famer British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, as she sat down with me right here in CSB Studios and shared a lot of insight from her perspective, her point of view as to what happened during certain points of her father's career, whether it was in WWE, WCW or outside the business, and was very kind to spare some time here. It was nearly 2 hours of conversation, and she even mentions it in the interview itself, where she has turned down requests for interviews. So I was very privileged and very thankful that she said yes and agreed to sit down with me and share her thoughts and her stories as well of her brother Harry and her mom Diana Hart Smith. And yeah, I still have trouble putting into words how grateful I was, and that she's turned down previous requests, and I was very fortunate that she said yes to. So it's an exclusive, rare interview. I think it's the best way to describe with Georgia Smith. It's over on my YouTube page at youtube.com/GoodOldJM. I say check it out. If you got 2 hours to spare, then yeah, you would enjoy getting to know who is Georgia Smith and what the future holds for her. And special shout outs to Georgia Smith and her family, by the way. So until next time, this is Good Old JM. Enjoy your weekend. Everyone be safe. Don't forget to change your clocks back. Don't forget that. It's daylight savings time.